Let's get this party started, man. Microphone check, 1 2 1 2. Okay, we rolling. Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Drew. What it do, as you know, and if you don't know, welcome to my channel. Today's video is going to be a Beyond the Garment podcast episode. And if this is your first time listening to the Beyond the Garment podcast, or watching it rather, I want to say thank you for joining. I post a podcast every week, every Wednesday, and so some of them get published to the YouTube channel, and this is an example of that. Today's guest is none other than the man Exsar. He is a writer, has his own blog, has his own podcast called The Selective. Maybe you've heard about it. And he just got a new position at Stockx as like this media / content creator. That should be a really awesome role for him. If you guys get any value from this podcast, be sure to give it a like. And without further ado, let's roll the intro. Let's get this thing started. Or let's get this party started, like I said. Today's guest is a writer, podcaster, content creator, and many more things that should be in the intro. He's been praised highly by the likes of Raimi and others, and I really wanted to have him on the podcast. I'm super excited to have him on the show. Allow me the honor of introducing you guys to Exsar from Between the Seams and The Selective, and now he's a Stockx writer, as I hear, and Stockx content creator in the realm of that, right? Exsar, man, how are you doing today?
Good, man. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on the pod. Appreciate the work that you do. I'm a listener week in and week out. I love the guests that you have on the show, so it's an honor to be here and to talk about clothes, to just kind of, get to know each other a little bit more and just give people some insight on a little bit about what I do, and hopefully we can all learn something along the way,
Definitely. I was telling Exsar guys before the show that he's one of the most interesting people that I see create content from a fashion standpoint, obviously, obviously imagery of fashion, fit pics, things of that nature. And then you kind of dissect him a little bit further, and you find out he has this really thought out blog, right, that he does called Between the Seams. And then I'm really curious about The Selective because I just kind of started consuming that content, and I listened to the podcast episode with Joel. Interesting. I love Joel. I didn't know much about him, like obviously other than the fact that he posts pictures online of fashion, things like that. But I thought it was yeah, he's a character. He's a very interesting kind of guy, and it was a good episode for sure. So I'm excited to dive in, man.
Cool, man. Well, yeah, I'm excited to be here. I know we have a lot to talk about, and it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be a fun time. So appreciate you having me on again.
No doubt, no doubt. Let's start with the first question. The question I always start out with, as you know, probably from listening, is, what is your background? Where are you from? And how is it like for you growing up as a kid, man?
Yeah, man. So from originally from the Bay Area in California, born in San Jose, right outside San Francisco. An immigrant family. Grandparents came to California from Mexico, and my whole family started in Mexico. You moved to California, and that's basically where my roots are. When I was young, a couple years old, my parents actually moved out to Texas.
Oh wow!
Just a better, a little bit more affordable. Obviously, California is a tough place to kind of make it and raise kids. So we moved to Texas, and I grew up in Texas. Went to school in the Austin area. Graduated school. Yeah, graduated school with a degree in journalism and a minor in political science, and then
what school?
Texas State University, so it's south of Austin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, man. So grew up in Texas. I always tell people, funny enough, I'm from California, but my heart's in Texas. And then, now I live in Buffalo, New York, and in July I will be taking off to New York City. So gonna head out to the city. So super excited about that. Incredible,
man. And I think that it's kind of interesting that right now, obviously there's an exodus from California. Sometimes people call it, right? People moving to Texas, people moving to Florida, things like that. But this man Exsar was an early adopter of that from a very young age. So
it's crazy because in Texas, we're getting a lot of people, especially in Austin, because the tech companies are moving to Austin.
All over Austin. Yeah.
And Austin's growing really fast. So there's a saying which I absolutely hate is "Don't California my Texas."
I heard it.
Hate it. It's so divisive, man. It's so divisive, and I hate it. But the funny thing is that it doesn't apply to me because I've already been in Texas for so long.
Exactly. Early at that, you were the first. You were one of the first.
But it's always funny to me because I'm like, wait a minute, that includes me,
Talk to me a little bit about your upbringing a little bit more, man. What were you doing as a kid? Did you obviously, what I tend to find with American upbringings or American childhoods, whether it be an immigrant like yourself or immigrant bringing, you're not an immigrant, obviously, but like
Yeah, yeah,
immigrant upbringing like yourself, and or living in different parts of the country, there are some key themes. Were you into sports? Did
yeah,
you always write? Were you always into fashion?
yeah.
Kind of tell me about that a little bit.
Yeah, so growing up in Texas was interesting to say the least. I mean, I love it here. Like I was mentioning to you before we started recording, I'm actually visiting my parents, so I'm in Texas right now before I head out to New York City.
Hmm.
Get to be home, spending time with my girlfriend and my dog and my family.
Yeah.
And growing up, it was very much uh, very Hispanic influence, I should say, because I grew up in South Texas, right? So a lot of the people look like me. We were all into the same things,
Yeah.
and there's a really big, thriving and very very passionate Hispanic population in Texas, which is what I love. I mean, let's not forget Texas used to be part of Mexico, right? So,
Absolutely.
um, the food here is incredible. The culture here is great, and just growing up in Texas was, it was great for me to be around, uh, people within my culture, if that makes sense. Leaving from California, big Hispanic population there, so coming to Texas was easy for my family.
Yeah.
Growing up, played a lot of soccer. To this day, it's still what I love. I'm actually really tall, 6'4", so I played some ball in high school too.
Holy cow, guys.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I played a little bit of basketball. Love playing soccer. To this day, I love playing sports. I love, when I come home, shooting hoops with the friends or going out to the pitch and playing soccer, some pickup games. So,
No doubt.
and then on the fashion side, man, it was really my parents, to be honest with you. My parents are really big into fashion. And to this day, my parents are big in the Japanese Americana stuff. Like I
Oh
always make
wow.
a joke, like my parents like buy more capital than I do. It's so crazy. So,
That's dope though.
yeah, dude. Um, so they're into fashion and that kind of trickled down to the kids. So, my sisters and I we're all pretty cognizant about what we wear and it's always kind of been like that. In high school it was obviously like the swag boy stuff.
Of course.
Uh in the 2010s, bro, an era that I don't want to ever relive. but but that was kind of my start to fashion, man. The swag boy era, you know what it is: the skinny
Yes.
jeans, the
Yeah.
snapbacks, the colorful Jordans.
Colorful
Oh,
shoes, man. Yeah,
oh man, it
definitely.
was bad time, bad time. And then in college, you don't have a lot of money when you're in college, so um, that's when I actually started thrifting. And once I graduated college and kind of solidified myself in the workforce and was able to take care of myself and provide for myself, that's when I would say fashion as a whole really took precedent as a hobby for myself, and that's where it kind of developed a lot, particularly in the past year with the pandemic too. I had a lot of
Yeah.
time to reflect on myself, and I'm sure with you and the listeners too, just kind of look at my closet and really like think about what I need, what I don't need, and kind of develop my style from there.
Exactly. And I think that that's a common thread, for a lot of people. The pandemic is one ingredient that, you can really slow down and just look at what you have. And then also as you just mature, you talk about an era in time in the 2010s where, I look back at some of my pictures and I really cringe, and I bet you do the same thing. And it's just funny to see, people mature over time, and they could be from Texas, they can be from Oregon, they can be from Colorado like I am, or they can be all the way in another country, and there's a lot of similarity in that, just maturity in fashion. So let's talk a little bit about between the seams. I know that you've recently, like within the last 8, 6, 7 months, have been doing between the seams. I've read a good amount of the articles. I think they're really well written. The journalism background definitely shows. But for those who don't know what that is, can you explain what Between the Seams is, and maybe just go into the naming too?
Yeah. So Between the Seams was a passion project that, like you said, started around 7 months ago. And it's a blog, strictly a blog format. So stories that you read about fashion with the focus on sustainability. And, I think the focus on sustainability part is at the forefront of Between the Seams, but I don't like just categorize myself as writing about sustainability, right? Like I also do product reviews. I'll
Totally.
talk about stuff going on in the industry as well. I don't want to just hinder myself to one particular niche, if you will, but there is a focus on sustainability. And with all the things I write, I try to throw in at least some points or some aspects of sustainable fashion in there. And it really started because I'm a writer and I wanted to do something that kind of mixed my professional and personal aspirations. Since the third grade, when I joined creative writing, I kind of knew that I could make something out of it.
That's
And
incredible.
oddly enough, I never consider myself a good writer, and to this day I don't, because I think writing is such an complex and hard skill to master. It's one of those things where when I read people's work and when I read literature and essays, I really think writing is a work of art, and it's something that you can always improve on and keep improving, throughout your whole life. So, I never want to say I'm a good writer per se. I just want to be able to convey a point
I
across
love that.
thoroughly. So
I
the
love
name,
that,
oddly
man.
enough, yeah. The name, oddly enough, was supposed to be Between the Stitch, and I guess the background is that I wanted to get into the complexities of fashion between the stitchings of our clothes. I had my brothers from California visit me in New York, and we were like brainstorming, what the blog would look like, and they were helping me out. And my brother, he was like, "What about Between the Seams?" And
Yeah,
it just like felt better off the tongue in some ways, and it just like looked better on paper. So Between the Stitch became Between the Seams, and
I love that.
yeah, I've been writing since October. Like I said, articles on my blog range from a wide variety of topics. I personally think that there's something interesting that everyone can read. But if you like vintage, particularly if you like sustainability, if you like learning about innovations in the textile industry, you know, around particularly like garment manufacturing, I think you'll find something beneficial on the blog.
Definitely. And I want to kind of go back a second and talk about how you explained how writing is an art, or a form of art in a way, right? It's a very tough skill. And I think I agree with that very strongly. My dad, he taught at university, but he taught like computer science. And even to this day, he'll do hours and hours of research of how to become a better writer, because the better you can convey a message to someone, or have a message conveyed in a way that touches them in particular in a certain way, or makes them think about something in a certain way, is it really is an art form, right? And I think that it's a little bit underappreciated in today's world, that is becoming so inundated with video. You have long form video, you have audio, which they're all great things. They all have a place in the world, absolutely. But I think that, the way you described that, I really wanted to hone in on that, because I really think it's really nicely said. In terms of how the blog started and the naming of it, I think that's super dope, right? And do you have anything that you're kind of working towards for the blog, like any kind of goals that you have for it? Obviously, you said that it's vintage folk, it has vintage aspects of it. Obviously, that ties into sustainability in one way or another. Product reviews, like how are you kind of formatting the content of the blog, I guess, essentially?
Yeah. It's a good question, and something that I ask myself a lot. I ask myself that week in and week out.
Mm,
Going back to what you said, talking about how writing is an art form. That's really at the forefront of Between the Seams. I wanted to be able to convey a message that you can get something out of it, essentially. And with the topics that I like to write about, it varies week by week, right?
right.
Sometimes, I'll buy a piece of clothing from, I don't know, the homies or something. I'll buy a sneaker from Ray, right? Like his Empire City Highs, for example. I'll do a review on those, right?
Mm,
Sometimes I see something really interesting happening in the industry, whether it's textile innovations, excuse me. Earth Day, for example, was a couple weeks
mm,
ago. I wrote a piece on Earth Day and the importance of Earth Day. Um, so in terms of plans for the future, I want to continue just creating content that I enjoy and I want to write about. But from the beginning, you know, and I tell this to a lot of people, like when I started Between the Seams, I did a blog because I love writing, but I also wanted to make a blog because I didn't want people to associate Between the Seams with me per se, right? Like I understand that it's my blog, and at the end of the day, like my words are being conveyed there, but I want to make strides to bring guests onto the blog who also will write individual pieces, and I have
yeah.
done that. I have
Yep.
a few people who are working with me right now to create stories, and I've worked with a couple individuals in the past who have written stories for my blog. And the goal from the beginning has always been to be kind of a community oriented space where people can talk about fashion in one way or another, with a focus on vintage and sustainability.
Definitely.
And when I first started out in my career, my first boss gave me a chance, and I'm where I'm at today because of her. And I probably didn't deserve that chance, to be honest. And I want to be able to give other people an opportunity to write. If somebody has a passion for fashion and they want to write for Between the Scenes, I'll work with you to make it happen, because giving people opportunities to be published, to have their name out there, is huge. And
Huge.
Yeah, it's huge. And I don't want to deny somebody that access, right? I want to be able to help people create the content that they want to create. And I think writing in particular looks so good on a resume because it's a skill that not a lot of people have. And it's a skill that's very hard to fine tune, if you will. So, having the ability, especially in this digital age, right, where everyone's on TikTok, YouTube, showing that you can write is a skill that can propel you, in your career, both in fashion or not,
Definitely. And I definitely noticed you had some other people on the blog. Sophie Peregrino was one of them, and I wanted to ask you, just kind of candidly, like, how do you network with these individuals? Are the people just from just the Instagrams of the world, getting to know them in real life, or those kind of things? Even Ray, like, I'm curious to know, like, how do you have these relationships within the community?
Yeah, man, it's it's an interesting point. So in terms of how I find people to want to write for this Between the Scenes, I typically do a story post, and then a bunch of people will reach out to me.
Yeah.
And then we'll try to work something out from there. My little sister, who is in school right now, and she's getting a degree in fashion merchandising, a business. She's also written on the blog before, and a lot of my relationships, man, within fashion have been like purely through Instagram, bro. Like,
It's crazy.
Posting a fit pic and then just like meeting people, and then next thing you know, y'all are like messaging each other, like y'all just, shooting the shit and talking about clothes and everything. And it's just so, I don't know, it's so weird to me how like all these relationships form through
It is. It is. You're so right. Man, I can think of so many people in the last year, because it really has been a year for at least me. So many DMs, so many interactions. Like, even with you and having the podcast and wanting to have you on, like, it's just, yeah. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
No, dude, it's crazy. I mean, we're all living it, right? Like we've all met people on Instagram that honestly, like 30 years ago, this would never be possible. And it's something that I do not take for granted for one single day, bro. Like, the relationships that I have made with people over Instagram, the people that I have met doing my blog, doing the podcast with Selective, and just like posting fit pics, is something that, in my opinion, is a blessing. Because, I mean, let's be honest, 40, 50 years ago, you grew up in your hometown, you maybe go to school somewhere else, you travel the world a little bit, you're only confined to like your physical presence somewhere, right?
Truly.
But think of the billions of people around the world who we could connect with on a personal level, who have the same interests as we do, that would have never been possible in the past. And I think that we are living in a very special time,
I agree. I totally agree. And I think that also one of the things that I've noticed is within the fashion or fit, a lot of times fit pick community, because I mean, that's a blanket term. If you post fashion content, right, whether it be like moods or photo dumps and just kind of aesthetics or whatever you want to call it, right? People are so, or for me, they've been relatively kind, even if something isn't that good, you know what I mean? Like, there are a lot of people that, who enter into the community, and they try to integrate themselves a proper way. Even and if their fits maybe aren't, the best, or if they're still trying to learn, or still trying to integrate themselves, like, they don't come with like malice intentions a lot of times. And I really do appreciate that, at least with what I've experienced, right?
Yeah. And also, yeah, I mean, people have been genuinely like friendly, right? Like, everyone's been very supportive, very nice, very engaging, just want to talk. No one's been hostile in any way. Like,
Yeah,
not a lot of gatekeepers in my experience, just people who want to connect,
Facts. So true. So true. Let's talk a little bit about the Selective, man. This is the segment of the pod. Actually, before we talk about the Selective, can we talk a little bit about your role at StockX. This is not like obviously
Yeah,
on the. I always have a list of things that I want to talk about, but talk. You just mentioned this, but what are you doing at StockX now, and how is it
yeah.
kind of impacting your life essentially?
Yeah, so I just recently got a job at Stockx, working my official title is a content manager. So I'm working a lot with the editorial side and the SEO side too. So a lot of page optimization for Google. Um, you know, basically a lot of what I do is on the website, right? Optimizing
Mm.
our pages, our category pages, our product descriptions, for Google for SEO, and then also writing stories, writing editorial content.
And
So
where does that editorial content live?
yeah, we have a blog called stockx.com/news.
Slash news.
And
Okay.
and we have writers that write about sneakers, streetwear,
Mm,
collectibles, electronics, and that's kind of like where I live as well. So
definitely.
um I've only had the position for a few months. It's been a lot of fun. Before getting this job, I worked at a TV station. Like I said, my background was in journalism. So
Mm,
my previous jobs leading up to this point were in journalism.
definitely.
Um, yeah, so since then has moved away from that. Now I'm working at StockX, which is, it's a blessing being able to do what I love and write, but also work with in and around clothes as well.
Definitely. StockX's empire is ever increasing. I mean,
Yeah.
when I think about StockX, from onset, I think about sneakers. But if I really dive deeper, I go, you have, fashion elements, obviously the brands and the things that are being resold.
Hmm.
You have watches,
Yeah.
bags. When the PlayStation kind of 5 whole debacle was going on and kind of
Yeah.
still
Yeah.
going on, you have electronics like that. You have
Yep.
collectibles. Pretty much StockX is establishing itself as a just a whole marketplace, essentially a full
Yeah.
a marketplace. And I wonder, do you think, obviously you don't have no idea, there are some physical StockX locations that sell certain things, or are there not? I'm not sure. Do you know about that, or is it
We
is it really
have
all online, all only?
Yeah, from my understanding, before I started, there were some locations. We actually just opened up. We're expanding across the world, right? So Hong Kong, we just opened up Australia too, which is a big launch for us. There is a physical Australia store, but most of what we do is online. Yeah, so
Yeah,
it truly is like a global business that has kind of exploded, and I have joined on the team as part of the explosion.
definitely. That's so
A lot of
cool.
the people that I've worked with have been there since the beginning 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Um, so it's crazy to see how big the business has gone, and yeah, it's a lot of fun working there. So I'm really loving the job so far.
Cool, man. Well, congrats to you, and I only wish success to you, man. I'm only wishing success, peace, love, and positivity to anybody
Always.
who's trying to make it happen for themselves. So,
Yeah, man, it's a
I,
tough world out there, right?
yeah, it really is. There's a lot of things that obviously are going on in the world,
Yeah.
but anytime you can find success and happiness in a career or a job, like that's butter. That's amazing. So,
Yeah, especially these days with the pandemic. I'm grateful that I've been able to stay employed through this time, and my heart goes out for everyone who's been struggling. And um, you know, my hope is that we're on better days soon.
good man. I totally agree with you. I totally
Yeah,
second that. Let's talk about the selective now.
for sure.
Let me get some water real quick,
Yeah, you're good.
man.
You're good.
You've been a fantastic guest, bro. I actually it's just it's so many cool people in the world, and I'm just so blessed, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah, no, there are, man. It's great getting to know everybody for sure.
Let's talk about the selective. Why don't we?
Mm.
Tell me what is the selective? I guess that's the easiest question I could ask as a question asker.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The Selective is an online marketplace shop, and we sell a lot of luxury goods and archive. So um, I'm newer to the Selective team. There are a few guys working on the Selective who work with the retail, if you will, the resale side of our website. But really the Selective has, since I was brought on the team, has been about trying to build a community. Um, in a lot of ways, and I don't want to make parallels, but you think of like Growth, right? Growth has articles, they have editorial pieces. When you're on Growth, there's more than just shopping for clothes, right? Like there's other
Yep.
stuff that you can do.
Yep.
For the Selective, we kind of want to do the same thing. We want to, in some ways, replicate that, but with our own twist, right? So I was brought on to help facilitate and start the podcast. Um, the podcast has been going great. It's been an absolute blast having people on. And that's just another way for us to engage with our community, right? And we also have a few guys who write editorial content on Selective. So we have some really, really good stories based off designer. We've had stories on Hyder Ackerman at Berludi, Chrome Hearts, the Jordan
Right.
85s. Like it just, it's going to be a community hub, where you can buy coveted items, right? But at the same time, you can also interact with the community through stories, through the podcast. We're also, launching Spotify playlists, Discord's coming soon as well. So we just want to kind of make it a community place.
Definitely. And I love that. And I definitely be looking to the selective just for inspiration as well. And
Mm,
if anyone's listening, obviously a great place you can connect with.
yeah,
The podcast is really well done. Obviously it'll continue to get better over time. The web store and the
yeah,
editorial, features and whatnot, really well done.
yeah,
And it, like I said, it's always great to have all these resources to be able to tap in with different individuals, listen to different stories and whatnot. Uh, what do you kind of how do I want to ask this question? When you run the podcast, like
mm,
how has that been, over the last, I think
yeah,
how many episodes do you guys have? Like 10 episodes or something like that?
yeah.
Or
We're going to be on 11 this week.
yeah, 10 episodes. How has it been, finding guests, and then how have the conversations been in your opinion?
Dude, it's been a lot of fun. Having a podcast is cool. I mean, as you know, it's a lot of work behind the scenes. Recording a podcast episode is literally like 25% of the work, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot that goes before and after having a podcast. Honestly, there are a lot of great fashion podcasts out there, and I listen to all of them. You know, what this is doing, what you're doing. I mean, I listen to fashion podcasts all the time. The Business of Fashion has a good podcast.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, and my goal is not to be a competitor in the space, but to be a resource in the space, right? Like I look at all of us who are doing podcasts as I really don't look at us as competitors, right? I just look at
Yeah,
us as like-minded individuals who want to facilitate conversations in the fashion space.
definitely.
And for the podcast, has kind of been our goal is to show a different side of these people that you follow on Instagram that you may have never heard their voice before.
Yeah.
Joel's a perfect example of that, right? Big
Mhm.
following on Instagram, pretty big influencer, if you will. Not a lot of people know him. And, our goal isn't, for him to tell his life story, but to give a little bit of insight on who he is, because there's only so much you can learn from a picture.
Definitely. Definitely. I love that. And Joel was one of my kind of favorite episodes because I do,
Mm,
his personality is really interesting and
very New York.
very New York. And I think anyone who lives outside of New York, it's very interesting always to hear what New York
Yeah.
is like. It really becomes mystified a lot of times
Mm.
because my life here in Colorado, full of the Rocky Mountains, is beautiful. It's beautiful,
Right.
but the cultural kind of
Yeah.
gravitas of New York is just a little bit different.
New York is wild, man. New York is wild. I love going out there. I'm excited to move out there. But yeah, dude. So, with the podcast, finding guests is I'm sure it's the same way you do. Just reach out,
Yeah,
try to see,
DM.
DM what time we can get it going.
Yeah,
And then from there it's just editing, making it sound good. The whole spiel after that. But it's been a lot of fun. And, to the audience listening, I just want to make it very clear that I don't look at this podcast or other fashion podcasts as competition. I mean, I mean, I consider, the people in and around the space my friends.
yeah,
And at the end of the day, I think we are all hitting on very important interviews. We are doing very important work to facilitate conversations. And if you follow the Selected podcast, you should follow the other podcasts that
I love
are
that.
around the fashion space, because we all offer something unique and something special.
Yeah, totally. And some of my favorites, I listen to the Fashion Collective with Alexander
Mm,
Walker. He does
yeah,
a great
he's good
job.
too. Yeah, yeah,
Um, a good friend of mine is Issa. He is On
yeah.
My Dime on Your Time is one I listen to quite often. Selective. Do you have any others on the top of your mind? Obviously, the Business of Fashion is pretty good. I don't want to put you on the spot.
Yeah, yeah. Business of Fashion is great. Outside of fashion, I listen to a lot of like soccer podcasts. So the Football Daily, the Football Ramble, both based out of the UK. Catching me up on European football.
Totally.
Uh, the BBC, what is the BBC Global News podcast? they release about 2 or 3 episodes a day. They have a full team, and it just
Wow.
gives you like the international news you need to know.
Yeah, I love that.
Beautiful podcast. Just keeps me up to date. And then, some others, The Daily, The New York Times, NPR, stuff like that. So I try to consume podcasts from a wide range of media, not just fashion.
Totally. I love that. And one of the things that I think the Selective is really interesting is their marketplace as well, right? I saw some of the items that you guys sell, from archive pieces to retro sneakers. How are those? Do you know how those things are curated, or are you the one? Or I guess you're not really the one doing it, but do you know how they're curated? And can you talk us about that a little bit?
Yeah. So there's like I mentioned, there's a team of guys who we're always out looking for pieces to curate, right? For example, the ALD New Balances, right? Super hot sneaker. We were able to get it. We were able to buy a few pairs, and then we list them on the Selective. So, and a lot of times, like it's just like other archive sellers. You just find, you're just looking for steals and deals. And throughout the years, you've obviously curated some collections for yourself. And then, for example, upcoming, we have a few drops scheduled, a few crazy pieces. Chrome Hearts Dunks, for example, are coming. And it's just like we just have like a group of guys that are just like working to curate items. Now, that's not what I do. I'm not involved on that aspect of the team. Those guys are really, really good at what they do.
They kill it.
and I let them focus on that. Me, I'm just working on the podcast. So, but yeah, it's always fun to see, how good of a job they do at just finding steals and deals across the internet and like sourcing a lot of these great pieces for us to carry on the site. So yeah, it's interesting for sure.
Totally. Well, XR, switching gears a little bit, man. I have a couple kind of final questions I want to ask you. The format of my podcast is about 30 to 40 minutes, as you know. Sometimes goes a little bit longer, and I like to keep it in that range. But in terms of fashion content creators, people who take fit pics, things of that nature. Are there people that you're fans of? Like, are there some content creators that you look at and you go, wow, they're doing a fantastic job with their styling or just the clothes that in the outfits that they create?
Yeah, there's a lot of good friends that I met on Instagram. If you're listening and you don't know my style, I would best describe it as like Western Americana. I absolutely love Japanese Americana. I love raw denim. I love patchwork. Oddly enough, being from Texas, I didn't like Western when I was a kid. And then as I left Texas and now that I'm back visiting, like, you kind of get a respect and a love for where you came from. So
definitely
I've been rocking a lot of what I wear is vintage pieces. So, some great designers and some great people I look for inspiration. Definitely Ramia, of course. I think he's killing it with what he does. I think he has a very, very good eye for not only garments, but cuts, silhouettes. I'm looking forward to his boots that he's been teasing.
Ooh, beautiful.
It's going to be beautiful. One of my favorite brands is Bare Knuckles. I love how Collection 5 moved into a more Western route. I think that Cole and Jacob took a chance. They've been known for this grunge, kind of like this grungy, dark style, if you will. And that transition to Western is obviously a big one to take with the brand. And I think they pulled it off beautifully. Absolutely love Bare Knuckles. And then other brands I'm rocking with, man, from the first, they make some great boots. Rocking a lot of Levi's. Favorite cut right now is the 517 flare. 517 flares are great. Yeah, and I just buy a lot of vintage. Some of my vintage comes from places like No Maintenance, Depop, and then some of my more expensive items, I like to budget money aside, for more coveted pieces, if you will, expensive pieces.
Is that the best way to do it? Just to, obviously you're probably constantly looking at things and like, oh, this is cool. You keep tabs on it, but you have like a separate budget essentially. Cause I know even for me, myself, there are some things that I kind of want to elevate my style, continue to kind of progress it and develop it. And a lot of times, I'm thinking about, how should I budget myself? Are you just setting aside money and then kind of using that kind of saved or extra account to kind of just make the purchases as you see fit?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. I mean, it all comes down to budgeting your money, know what your budget is and what your limits are, and then buy pieces from there. There are times where I don't spend money on clothes for a month, and I'll make sure to save a little bit for a particular piece I want.
Yeah.
That being said, I know this might be maybe a little controversial, but I do think vintage is the new luxury. I think historically, when you look at fashion, through decades and decades of time, one of the key components of why luxury has been so sought after is not only because of its price, but its exclusivity, which breeds individuality through that exclusivity. And I think vintage does that without the price tag.
Yeah.
Right? Because you can find a vintage piece, a beautiful vintage pair of like flared trousers, right? For example, I was in Colorado Springs a couple months ago with my family.
Oh wow.
I found a pair of like these pistachio, like 1970s flared. And my dogs are barking. Sorry about that.
No problem.
I found this beautiful flared trouser from like the 1970s. They look luxury, like when you look at them. I probably paid $50, but in that sense, that's what I mean. That piece is individual to me, but it fills that gap of exclusivity and maybe not exclusivity, but individuality. So, I do think that vintage in a lot of ways fulfills that niche for people who don't have the money.
Definitely.
Right. So while I do like to buy designer pieces that are more expensive, I think it's important for people, especially if you're younger, to go vintage shopping. It's better for the planet, and ultimately, you're gonna feel better when you find a piece that works well with your rotation, and more importantly, makes you feel good about yourself. And
Totally.
luxury does that, but vintage does that with a better price tag.
Totally. I love that. And what advice do you have for maybe someone who wants to be a writer, kind of
Mm,
switching gears a little bit back to
yeah,
what you do, wants to be a writer, wants to be a podcaster, kind of just do the things that we do, man. Like
yeah.
how do they dip their toe into uh just the entire space? Because I honestly I don't really just view you as one thing. You're a creative, right? And you're someone who, like I said, obviously we know you write. You obviously, create content on Instagram, you create
Yeah.
podcast content, so that's audio content. And I know a lot of people are they're pushing for like imagery and whatnot on the Selective podcast on
Yeah.
YouTube.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's video creation. I mean, I did my homework a little bit, but
Yeah. Yeah.
how does someone kind of start that journey, whether not even necessarily if they want to be like a writer or
Mm.
just a podcaster, if they just want to kind of create content on Instagram, where do you think they should start?
Yeah. Kind of backtracking a little bit, when we're in New York City, and I'm situated in the city, we want the Selected podcast to also have a video format as well. So we're going to be working on that in the next few months. So that's exciting as well. But in terms of advice I would give, man, it's I've been wanting to do this blog initially for years, for years. But it's like I mentioned before, like when I've never really considered myself a good writer, so my self-confidence in my ability to create content was always very low.
Mm,
And I wanted to do something unique, but something that plays into my strengths, right? And I love writing, so a blog was a perfect way for me to convey that. Starting between the seams was probably the best thing that's ever happened to me, or one of the best things that ever happened to me, man. Like it helped me land this position at StockX, in conjunction with my experience in the world and in the workplace. But
yeah.
it did help, right?
Mm,
It helped me get in touch with the guys at the Selective. It's helped me meet people like you. It's helped me build relationships with other people. And it all started from wanting to take a chance on something that I wanted to do.
mm,
And, whether you want to create, uh, you know, YouTube videos, you want to do a podcast, you want to do a blog, or you even want to do something as simple as take fit pics. Another funny thing I tell people is that like my $15 tripod that I bought off Amazon about a year and a half ago is responsible for my Instagram growth. That little
that's
stupid tripod, it has literally brought me where I am today on Instagram.
I love it.
And and I carry that little thing around all the time in my tote bag, bro. So I can take my fit pics.
I love
And
it.
just simple things like that, like just take the chance to express yourself. It's embarrassing to pull out your tripod and take a fit pic. I fucking hate it.
Yeah.
To this day, I hate it. But it's something that I like to do. So I took a chance, and for people listening, I understand it's hard to take chances. I understand that obviously the fear of what people will think is very much real and very
Yep.
much there.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, if you're confident in what you wear, if you want to take fit pics, if you want to write, if you want to create YouTube videos, do it to the best of your ability and have fun. Because at the end of the day, taking that chance is going to be more worth it than not taking it at all.
I love it. I couldn't have said it better myself, man. I love that answer, and I think a lot of people will take that to heart. Hopefully, a lot of people take that to heart. That's a beautiful way to kind of conclude what we're talking about here. Where can people find out more about you and learn more about you and all the things that you do?
Yeah, I guess a good place to start is follow me on Instagram at 070XR, EXSAR. Follow Between the Seams, follow The Selective. If you have any questions, reach out to me in a DM. Always happy to help people with whatever they need. Yeah, I mean, I've had people reach out to me talking about, what tripod did you get from Amazon, all the way to where did you get that jacket? So I'm always happy to chop it up with people. So yeah, appreciate you having me on, bro. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to everything that you do, bro. You're doing great work.
Thank you, man. I appreciate having you and taking the time. And I think you really dropped some great gems. The last question was fantastic, and all the questions throughout. This is such a genuine guy, everyone who's listening, and he's definitely gonna make his mark in a lot more ways than just one. So connect with him if you'd like to. All right, man. I'm gonna cut it, and I want to thank you guys so much for tuning in to this episode. If you did enjoy it, of course, give it a like. If you like the content, subscribe. I try to be just as genuine and as raw as I can be on the podcast. So I don't try to edit out too many things, but I try something new with using my camera to actually record things. If you guys enjoyed it, let me know. If you didn't like it, let me know, because I try to make content for you. So just let me know.